The uncomfortable truth.
You were told being good was the right thing to do. That patience would be rewarded. That kindness would eventually pay off. That doing the right thing mattered more than winning. You believed it. And now you watch others get promoted while you stay reliable. You see people with half your integrity build twice your influence. You notice the loudest voice in the room gets heard while your thoughtful input gets nodded at and forgotten. This is not an accident. Good people are praised constantly. They are called mature, reasonable, grounded, thoughtful. They are told they are the moral backbone of their workplace, their family, their friend group. But they are praised after they lose. After someone else got the position. After the credit went elsewhere. After the decision was made without them. The praise comes when it costs nothing. When you are no longer a threat. When you have already stepped aside. Being good is not a strategy for winning. It is a strategy for being acceptable while others win around you. You have been told that goodness is strength, that patience is power, that integrity will speak for itself. It does not. Integrity keeps you visible enough to be relied upon and quiet enough to be ignored. Patience keeps you waiting while urgency gets answered. Goodness keeps you predictable while others remain interesting. This is not a moral failure on your part. This is the system working exactly as designed. Society does not reward good people. It relies on them. There is a difference. Reward means elevation. Reliance means you stay exactly where you are, doing exactly what you do, so that others can move freely around you. You are the stabilizer, the one who does not create problems, the one who absorbs tension instead of generating it, the one who makes things easier for people who will never make things easier for you. And you were trained to accept this, not through cruelty, through approval. You learned early that being good meant safety, that managing your emotions meant maturity, that not pushing back meant being reasonable, that letting things go meant being the bigger person. And it worked. You became all of those things. But those things do not generate leverage. They generate comfort for everyone except you. Goodness is not a character trait. It is a social position. It is the position you take when you want to avoid conflict, when you want to be seen as safe, when you need approval more than you need power. You were not born good. You became good because it worked. It kept you accepted. It kept you from being punished, excluded, or labeled difficult. But what worked in childhood does not work in adult systems of power. In childhood, being good kept you safe from authority. In adulthood, being good keeps you safe from opportunity. Because opportunity does not go to the person who is easiest to manage. It goes to the person who is hardest to ignore. Good people are easy to manage. They regulate themselves. They do not need to be handled. They absorb disappointment without complaint. They continue performing even when overlooked. This makes them invaluable. But invaluable is not the same as prioritized. You are valued for your stability, not your potential. You are kept close because you do not destabilize anything, not because you are seen as capable of more. And the moment you try to be more, you are told you are changing, that you are not yourself, that this does not feel like you. Because the version of you that others prefer is the version that stays in place. This is why good people do not win. They are too useful where they are. Moving you up means someone loses a stabilizer. Promoting you means losing someone who does not create friction. Choosing you means choosing someone who might start choosing themselves. And systems do not want that. They want you exactly as you are. Dependable, non-disruptive, good. You think being good will eventually be noticed. That someone will finally see how much you contribute. That your consistency will speak for itself. It already has. It has spoken clearly. It has said you are safe to deprioritize. That you will stay even when passed over. That you do not need to be chosen because you will not leave. This is not about fairness. This is about function. You are functioning exactly as expected. You are performing your role. The role of the person who makes everything easier while asking for nothing louder than everyone else. And it is killing your leverage. Not because you are weak. Because you are too controlled. Control is not strength. Control is the absence of threat. And people who are not a threat do not get prioritized. They get managed. You have spent years being managed. Being appreciated. Being thanked. But appreciation is not opportunity. Thanks is not power. Praise is not selection. You are told you are doing everything right. And you are. You are doing everything required to remain exactly where you are. This is the trap. Goodness does not lead anywhere. It keeps you in place while appearing noble. It is not that good people finish last. It is that good people are never in the race. They are watching it, managing it, making sure it runs smoothly. And when it is over, they are thanked, not chosen, thanked. If goodness worked, you would not be listening to this. You would not be searching for the reason you are always passed over despite doing everything right. You would not be wondering why your effort does not translate into influence. You would not be questioning why being good has not made you matter more. You already know the answer. You have known it for a long time. You have just been afraid to say it out loud. Being good has not worked. It has kept you harmless. And harmless people do not win. They get praised for losing quietly.
Part 1. How good became a role. Chapter 1. Goodness is a position, not a trait.
You believe you are a good person. That goodness is something you are, not something you do for a reason. You are wrong. Goodness is not a trait. It is a position you adopted because the alternative was too costly. You did not choose to be good because you examined the world and decided morality was the best strategy. You chose it because being bad meant punishment, because being difficult meant exclusion, because being too much meant being labeled a problem. And you did not want to be a problem. You wanted to be safe. So you learned to be good. Not good in the abstract. Good in the specific way that kept you accepted. Good in the way that made authority comfortable. Good in the way that did not create friction for the people who controlled your access to safety, approval, and belonging. This is not character. This is behavior regulation. And you are still doing it. You are still monitoring yourself. Still adjusting your tone. Still choosing not to push back because pushing back feels dangerous. Still softening your needs because expressing them fully feels aggressive. You are still being good. Not because you want to be. Because you are afraid of what happens if you are not. This is the position. The social position you occupy when you decide that being acceptable is more important than being prioritized. And it is a position everyone recognizes. People know when they are talking to someone who will not push back. They know when they are dealing with someone who has learned to absorb disappointment without retaliating. They know when someone is more afraid of conflict than they are of losing. And they treat that person accordingly. Not with cruelty. With comfort. They become comfortable around you. Comfortable asking for more. Comfortable assuming you will say yes. Comfortable taking what you give without offering equivalent return. Because good people do not require equivalence. They give first. They wait for fairness instead of demanding it. And fairness does not come. Not because the world is unfair. Because you are not positioned to receive it. Fairness goes to people who create consequences for unfairness. Good people do not create consequences. They absorb outcomes and remain stable. This is why you are praised. You are a shock absorber. You take the impact of disappointment, disrespect, and deprioritization, and you do not fracture. You do not create a problem that needs solving. You remain good. And this makes you useful, not powerful. Useful people are kept close. Powerful people are kept in mind. You are kept close because you do not require careful handling. Because you will not escalate. Because you can be disappointed without becoming a liability. Powerful people require handling. They generate tension if ignored. They make their displeasure costly. They do not absorb outcomes quietly. And this is why they are chosen. Not because they are better. Because they are harder to dismiss. You have made yourself easy to dismiss by being too easy to manage. You think this is a virtue. That self-regulation is maturity. That not burdening others with your needs is kindness. It is not kindness. It is self-erasure. You are erasing your own priority in real time by making sure no one has to think about you unless they want to. And they do not want to. Because thinking about you means redistributing power, attention, and resources towards someone who has never demanded it. Why would they do that? You have already proven you will stay without it. This is the position you occupy. The position of the person who does not need to be chosen to remain present. And as long as you remain in that position, you will not be chosen. Because being chosen requires being seen as someone who might leave. Someone who might create a gap. Someone whose absence would cost something. Your absence costs nothing. You have made sure of that. You are always available. Always steady. Always good. And this is not strength. This is invisibility disguised as virtue. Strength would mean creating boundaries that make others adjust. Strength would mean allowing your displeasure to be felt. Strength would mean making yourself difficult to ignore by refusing to make everything easy. But you do not do that, because doing that would mean being seen as difficult, as demanding, as not good. And you cannot afford that, because your entire identity is built on being the person who does not create problems. But people who do not create problems do not create urgency. And without urgency, there is no priority. You will wait forever for fairness, because fairness is not a default. It is a response to pressure. And you do not apply pressure. You apply patience. Patience is not power. Patience is the absence of leverage. You are waiting for someone to notice you, to finally see how much you contribute, to reward you for being good. But they already see you. They see you exactly as you are, as someone who will contribute whether rewarded or not. And that is why you are not rewarded. Because reward is unnecessary. You already perform. Goodness is not a trait you were born with. It is a position you moved into when being anything else felt too dangerous. And you are still there. Not because it is working, because leaving it feels like losing yourself. But you are not losing yourself. You are losing the version of yourself that was built to keep others comfortable. And that version was never designed to win. It was designed to stay safe. Safety destroys leverage.
Chapter 2, How You Were Trained to Be Good.
You do not remember deciding to be good. You remember being corrected until you were. This is how it works. Goodness is not chosen. It is trained. You were trained the same way everyone is trained. Through approval and withdrawal. Through praise for compliance and discomfort for resistance. You learned early that certain behaviors made adults relax. That staying quiet kept you safe. That not asking for too much kept you liked. And you learned that the opposite created tension. That being too loud meant being corrected. That asking for more meant being told you were selfish. That expressing anger meant being told you were out of control. So you stopped. Not because you wanted to. Because you needed the adults around you to stay calm. You needed them to approve of you. You needed to remain inside the circle of acceptance. And the price of that acceptance was your self-regulation. You learned to manage yourself so that others did not have to manage you. You learned to suppress your needs so that others did not have to accommodate them. You learned to be good so that no one had to deal with you being bad. This was not cruelty. This was training. And it worked. You became the child who did not create problems. The one who could be trusted. The one who made things easier. And you were praised for it. But the praise was not for being yourself. It was for being manageable. You were praised for sitting still. For not interrupting. For accepting no without arguing. For sharing when you did not want to. For being mature when maturity meant silence. And every time you were praised, the lesson deepened. The lesson that being good meant being rewarded. That compliance meant safety. That self-erasure meant love. You internalized it completely. You became it. And now you cannot tell the difference between who you are and who you were trained to be. You think patience is your nature. It is not. It is your conditioning. You think being reasonable is a strength. It is not. It is a survival response. You think managing your emotions is maturity. It is not. It is a defense mechanism you built to avoid punishment. You were not born calm. You were corrected into calmness. You were not born accommodating. You were shaped into accommodation by a system that punished resistance. And the people who trained you were not villains. They were operating inside the same system. They were teaching you what they were taught. That goodness is safety. That compliance is maturity. That not being a problem is the same as being valued. But it is not the same. Being valued means being prioritized. Not being a problem means being ignored until needed. And you were trained to accept that. To see it as fairness. To believe that waiting your turn was noble. But turns do not come. Not for people who wait. Turns come for people who create pressure. Who make their needs visible. Who refuse to be endlessly patient. You were never taught that. You were taught the opposite. You were taught that asking for too much was wrong. That wanting more was selfish. That expressing frustration was immature. And you believed it. Because the alternative was punishment. Not physical punishment. Social punishment. The punishment of disappointment. Of being told you were not who they thought you were. Of being excluded from approval. That punishment was unbearable. So you avoided it. You became the person who did not disappoint. Who did not demand. Who did not create friction. And you were praised. Over and over. You were praised. But the praise was a leash. It kept you performing. It kept you regulated. It kept you good. And now you are an adult, and the leash is still there. You still feel it. The pull of approval. The fear of disappointing. The instinct to manage yourself so others do not have to. You still choose silence over confrontation. Patience over urgency. Accommodation over assertion. Not because it works. Because it feels like survival. And it was survival when you were a child. When you had no power. When your safety depended on adult approval. But you are not a child anymore. You have power now. Resources. Options. Independence. But you are still operating as if you do not. As if disapproval will destroy you. As if being difficult will cost you everything. It will not. What will cost you everything is staying in the position you were trained into. The position of the person who makes everything easier for others while never asking others to make anything easier for you. You were trained to be good, not for your benefit, for theirs. And you are still performing that role. Not because you want to, because you do not know what happens if you stop. You are afraid that if you stop being good, you will become bad. That if you stop being patient, you will become unreasonable. That if you stop managing yourself, you will become out of control. But that is not what happens. What happens is you become prioritized. Because priority does not go to the person who is easiest to manage. It goes to the person who is hardest to ignore. And right now, you are very easy to ignore. Because you were trained to be. Who did you need approval from to survive?
Chapter 3: Why Good People Are Chosen Last.
You have been passed over so many times you have stopped counting. The promotion went to someone louder. The opportunity went to someone pushier. The attention went to someone less qualified but more visible. And every time, you told yourself the same thing. That it was not fair. That you deserved it more. That eventually, someone would notice. But no one noticed. Or they noticed and chose someone else anyway. This is not random. This is pattern. Good people are not chosen first. They are chosen last. If at all. Not because they are less capable. Because they are less urgent. You do not create urgency. You create reliability. And reliability does not generate priority. It generates dependency. People depend on you to stay where you are. To keep doing what you do. To remain stable while everything else moves. And they do not want to disrupt that. Because disrupting that means losing the person who makes everything easier. So they leave you where you are. And they choose someone else. Not because that person is better. Because that person made themselves impossible to ignore. You made yourself easy to ignore by being too easy to rely on. You are always available. Always flexible. Always willing to adjust. And this makes you valuable. But it does not make you prioritized. Priority is not about value. It is about urgency. And you do not generate urgency. You absorb it. When something needs to be done, you do it. When someone needs help, you offer it. When there is a gap, you fill it. And you do this without making it difficult. Without requiring anything in return. Without creating a problem if you are not acknowledged. This is why you are relied on. Not why you were chosen. Being chosen requires creating a gap that others notice. It requires making your absence feel costly. It requires forcing others to consider what happens if you are not there. And you do not do that. Because doing that feels like manipulation. Like withholding. Like being difficult. But it is not manipulation. It is boundary. Boundary is what makes priority necessary. Without boundary, there is no cost to ignoring you. And right now, there is no cost. You have made sure of that. You stay even when overlooked. You perform even when unacknowledged. You contribute even when someone else gets credit. And you do this because you believe it is the right thing to do. That being good means giving regardless of return. But giving regardless of return is not goodness. It is self-destruction disguised as virtue. You are teaching people that they do not need to choose you. Because you will be there anyway. And they believe you. Because you have proven it over and over. This is why you are passed over in relationships. Why your needs come last. Why your partner assumes you will adjust. Why your flexibility is treated as infinite. Because you have never made it finite. You have never created a boundary that forces them to choose. You wait. You accommodate. You hope they notice. They do not notice. Because noticing requires disruption. And you do not disrupt anything. You are the person who makes everything smoother. Who absorbs tension. who does not add to the problem. And this makes you useful in the relationship, not central to it. Central requires being someone whose needs cannot be endlessly delayed, someone whose displeasure creates consequence, someone who refuses to be the only one adjusting. But you do not refuse. You adjust. Every time. And every time you adjust, you teach them that your needs are negotiable. And negotiable needs do not get prioritized. They get delayed. This is why you were chosen last at work. Why your ideas are heard but not acted on. Why your contribution is acknowledged but not rewarded. Because you do not make your contribution conditional. You give it freely. You offer it without requiring recognition. And recognition does not come because it is not necessary. You already contribute. You already perform. You already stay. Choosing you would mean disrupting a system that is already working. And systems do not disrupt themselves. They keep functioning. And you are part of that function. You are the person who ensures everything runs smoothly, who fills gaps, who does not create problems. And this makes you irreplaceable in your current position, not qualified for the next one. Because the next position requires someone who creates urgency, who makes things happen, who cannot be easily managed. And you are easily managed. You manage yourself. You do not need oversight. You do not need to be convinced. You do not need to be chosen to keep performing. And this is exactly why you are not chosen. Because choosing you would mean moving someone who is already performing without being prioritized. It would mean losing a stabilizer. It would mean redistributing power towards someone who has never demanded it. And there is no pressure to do that. Because you do not create pressure. You create patience. And patience does not generate priority. It generates waiting. You are waiting for fairness. For someone to finally see you. For your turn. But your turn is not coming. Because turns do not come to people who wait. They come to people who make waiting impossible. And you have made waiting easy. You have made yourself someone who can be deprioritized without consequence. You do not leave. You do not withdraw. You do not make your displeasure costly. You stay. You adjust. You remain good. And this is why you are chosen last. Not because you are weak. Because you are too controlled. Control is not strength. Control is the absence of disruption. And people who do not disrupt do not get prioritized. They get managed. You have been managed your entire life. At work. In relationships. In your family. You have been kept exactly where you are because moving you would cost someone a stabilizer. And no one wants to lose that. So they keep you. But they do not choose you. They choose the person who makes noise. Who creates urgency. Who refuses to be endlessly patient. They choose the person who is harder to ignore. And you are not hard to ignore. You are easy to rely on. And as long as you remain easy to rely on, you will remain unchosen. You are not overlooked by accident.
Part 2. Morality as a Control System. Midpoint Fracture.
You have been operating under a lie your entire life. The lie is not that morality exists. The lie is what morality does. You were told morality was about right and wrong, about good and bad, about treating people well and making ethical choices. That is not what morality is. Morality is not about right and wrong. It is about regulating who is allowed to move. It is a system of control that decides who gets to act and who has to wait, who gets to take and who has to give, who gets to disrupt and who has to stabilize. And you have been on the wrong side of that system your entire life. You have been the one who waits, who gives, who stabilizes, not because you are more moral, because you are more controlled. Morality is the language used to keep you controlled, to keep you in place, to keep you performing without demanding. When you are told something is wrong, you are not being given ethical guidance. You are being given a boundary, a line you are not supposed to cross, and you do not cross it, because crossing it would mean being bad, and being bad would mean losing your identity. Your entire identity is built on being good, on being the person who does the right thing, who does not take what is not offered, who does not push when told to wait. But that identity is a cage. It is not protecting you. It is containing you. And the moment you try to move outside of it, the system responds. Not with violence, with judgment. You are told you are changing, that this is not like you, that you are being selfish, that you are not thinking about others. And you stop, because you cannot bear being seen that way. You cannot bear being the person who is selfish, who does not think about others. who takes without permission. So you stay good, and you stay in place. And this is not an accident. This is the system working exactly as designed. Morality does not exist to make the world better. It exists to make the world stable. And stability requires that some people stay where they are, that some people do not move, that some people remain predictable. You are one of those people. You have been kept predictable by a moral framework that punishes deviation, that rewards compliance, that makes you feel wrong for wanting more. And you have internalized it so completely that you do not even see it as control anymore. You see it as character. You think being good is who you are, that not taking too much is integrity, that waiting your turn is fairness. But it is not fairness. It is positioning. You have been positioned as the person who does not move. And morality is the tool used to keep you there. Not because the people around you are consciously manipulating you, because they are operating inside the same system. They believe the same things. They have been taught the same rules. And the rules say that good people do not disrupt, that good people do not demand, that good people wait. And you have waited your entire life. And nothing has come, because nothing comes to people who wait. Things come to people who move. And you are not allowed to move, because moving would mean violating the moral framework that has kept you safe. But that safety is not protection. It is containment. You are not safe. You are stuck. And the reason you are stuck is not because you lack capability. It is because you are afraid of being seen as bad. And that fear is the control. That fear is what keeps you from acting, from demanding, from taking. That fear is what morality relies on. The fear of being judged, of being labeled selfish, of being seen as wrong. And as long as you are afraid of that, you will never move. Because moving requires violating the moral rules you have lived by. It requires doing things that feel wrong. It requires being seen as selfish, demanding, and disruptive. And you cannot do that, because doing that would mean losing yourself. But you are not losing yourself. You are losing the version of yourself that was built to serve a system that does not serve you. And until you are willing to lose that version, you will remain exactly where you are. Morality is not your friend. It is your leash. And the people holding that leash are not villains. They are beneficiaries. They benefit from you staying good, from you staying in place, from you never moving. And they will use morality to keep you there. Not with cruelty, with concern. They will tell you they are worried about you, that you are not yourself, that this does not feel right. And you will believe them, because you have been trained to believe that their discomfort is evidence of your wrongness. But their discomfort is not evidence of anything except that you are moving. And movement terrifies people who rely on your stillness. You do not have to stay still. You have been told you do, but you do not. The question is whether you can tolerate being seen as wrong long enough to discover that wrong was just another word for movement.
Chapter 4. Morality rewards obedience, not impact.
You think morality rewards good behavior. It does not. It rewards obedience. There is a difference. Good behavior means acting in ways that produce positive outcomes. Obedience means acting in ways that do not disrupt the existing structure. And morality is interested in the structure, not the outcome. This is why rule followers are praised and rule setters are punished. Rule followers do not threaten the system. They operate inside it. They accept the boundaries. They do not question why the rules exist or who benefits from them. They just follow. And they are rewarded for following. Not with power, with approval. Approval is the reward for obedience. It is the signal that you are doing what you are supposed to do, that you are not a problem, that you are safe to keep around. And you have been chasing that approval your entire life. You have followed the rules. You have stayed inside the lines. You have done what you were told. And you have been praised, constantly praised. But the praise did not lead anywhere. It just kept you performing. Because that is what praise does. It reinforces behavior. It keeps you doing what you are already doing. And what you are already doing is obeying. You are obeying rules you did not create. Rules that were designed by people who are no longer obeying them. Because the people who set the rules are not bound by them. They are protected by them. The rules exist to regulate everyone else. To keep people predictable. To keep people from moving in ways that threaten the structure. And you have never threatened the structure. You have supported it. You have been the person who follows through, who does what is expected, who does not create problems. And this has made you morally acceptable, but it has not made you powerful. Because power does not come from following rules. It comes from setting them. And setting rules requires doing things that violate the existing moral framework. It requires acting in ways that look wrong to people who are still obeying. This is why every shift in power looks immoral at first. It looks selfish, aggressive, disruptive. Because it is disruptive. It is disrupting the system that kept the previous structure in place. And the people inside that system react with moral outrage. Not because the disruption is wrong, because it threatens their position. Moral outrage is not about ethics. It is about territory. When someone says what you are doing is wrong, they are not giving you ethical guidance. They are defending their position. They are telling you to stop moving, to stop threatening, to go back to being predictable. And if you are someone who has spent your life being good, you will stop. Because you cannot tolerate being seen as wrong. But being seen as wrong is the cost of movement. It is the cost of impact. Impact requires disruption. And disruption always violates someone's sense of what is right. This is why people with impact are rarely described as good. They are described as effective, as powerful, as influential, but not good. Because good means non-disruptive. And impact requires disruption. You cannot have both. You have to choose. And you have spent your entire life choosing good. Choosing to be non-disruptive. Choosing to follow the rules. And the result is that you have had no impact. Not because you are incapable, because you are obedient. Obedience is the opposite of impact. Obedience means accepting the structure as it is. Impact means changing it. And you cannot change a structure by obeying it. You can only maintain it. And that is exactly what you have been doing. Maintaining a structure that does not serve you. You have been maintaining it by following rules that keep you in place. By being good in ways that make you predictable. By refusing to disrupt because disruption feels wrong. But disruption is not wrong. Disruption is necessary. Without disruption, nothing changes. Without disruption, the same people stay in power. Without disruption, you stay exactly where you are. And you are tired of being where you are. But you are not tired enough to violate the moral framework that keeps you there. You are still waiting for permission. For someone to tell you it is okay to move. For the rules to change so that moving does not feel wrong. But the rules will not change. Because the rules are designed to prevent movement. And permission will not come. Because permission is only given to people who do not need it. People who need permission do not move. They wait. And while they wait, other people move without permission. Without approval. Without concern for whether it looks right. And those people are the ones who create impact. Not because they are better. Because they are willing to be seen as wrong. And you are not willing. Not yet. You are still performing obedience. Still following rules. Still being good. And the system is rewarding you for it. With praise. With approval. With the label of being a good person. But that label is not a prize. It is a leash. It is keeping you obedient. Keeping you predictable. Keeping you from moving in ways that would threaten the structure. And as long as you value that label more than you value impact, you will remain obedient. You will remain good. And you will remain powerless. Because morality does not reward impact. It punishes it. It calls it selfish, aggressive, wrong. And it uses those labels to stop movement before it starts. And you have been stopped. Over and over. Not by force. By judgment. You stopped yourself because you could not bear being judged. Because being seen as wrong felt like losing your identity. But your identity is the problem. Your identity is built on obedience. And obedience is not strength. It is compliance. You have been complying your entire life. And compliance has kept you exactly where you are. Impact requires something else. It requires disobedience. Not reckless disobedience. Strategic disobedience. The willingness to break rules that do not serve you. To ignore moral frameworks that keep you contained. To act in ways that others will call wrong. And to keep acting anyway. Because the people who create impact are not the ones who wait for the rules to change. They are the ones who change the rules by refusing to follow them.
Chapter 5. The Hidden Contract of Being Good.
You did not know you were signing a contract. But you signed one anyway. The contract was never written down. It was never explained. But you agreed to it the moment you decided to be good. And the terms are simple. Behave. Do not threaten. Do not destabilize. And in return, you will receive acceptance. Not advancement. Acceptance. This is the contract. And you have been performing it your entire life. You have behaved. You have stayed non-threatening. You have absorbed disruption instead of creating it. And you have been accepted. You have been included. You have been told you are valued. But valued is not the same as prioritized. Accepted is not the same as chosen. You were never promised advancement. You were promised acceptance. And acceptance is what you received. You were accepted into spaces where you were never the focus. You were included in decisions where your input was considered but not acted on. You were valued for your stability but not your potential. This is the contract, and it is still in effect. You are still behaving, still managing yourself, still making sure you do not create problems. And you are still being accepted, still being included, still being valued. But you are not advancing, because advancement was never part of the deal. The deal was that you would stay where you are, that you would remain predictable, that you would continue stabilizing everything around you. And in return, you would not be excluded. Exclusion is what you were afraid of. Exclusion is what you were avoiding. And the contract protected you from that. It kept you inside. It kept you accepted. But it did not move you forward. Because moving forward requires breaking the contract. It requires threatening. It requires destabilizing. It requires behaving in ways that make others uncomfortable. And you cannot do that without violating the terms you agreed to. This is why good people do not advance. They are too afraid of breaking the contract. They are afraid that if they stop behaving, they will be excluded. That if they start threatening, they will be rejected. That if they destabilize anything, they will lose their acceptance. And they are right. They will lose it. But what they do not understand is that acceptance is not protection. It is containment. You have been accepted into a position you cannot leave. You have been included in a system that does not serve you. You have been valued for qualities that keep you powerless. And you have stayed because leaving would mean breaking the contract. Leaving would mean risking exclusion. And exclusion feels like death. It felt like death when you were a child. When exclusion meant losing safety. When being cast out meant being alone. But you are not a child anymore. And exclusion is not death. Exclusion is just discomfort. Temporary discomfort. And on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. Freedom to move without permission. Freedom to act without approval. Freedom to prioritize yourself without being labeled selfish. But you cannot access that freedom without breaking the contract. And breaking the contract means accepting that you will no longer be seen as good. You will be seen as difficult, as demanding, as someone who is no longer playing by the rules. And the people who benefit from your compliance will respond. Not with violence, with disappointment. They will tell you they are disappointed in you, that they expected better, that this is not who you are. And this will hurt, because their disappointment feels like proof that you are wrong. But their disappointment is not proof of anything except that you are no longer performing the contract. You are no longer behaving in ways that serve them, and they do not like it. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their disappointment is not evidence that you are failing. It is evidence that you are moving. And movement always disappoints people who relied on your stillness. This is the cost of breaking the contract. You lose acceptance. But acceptance is not what you need. You need advancement. And advancement requires that you stop performing the contract you never agreed to in writing, but have been performing your entire life. The contract that says you will behave, that you will not threaten, that you will stabilize everything around you in exchange for being allowed to stay. You were allowed to stay, but you were never allowed to move. And staying is killing you. Not quickly, slowly. It is killing your potential, your leverage, your ability to create the life you actually want. Because the life you actually want requires that you stop being good in the way you have been good. It requires that you start being effective instead. Effective means doing what works, not what is accepted. And what works often violates the contract. It requires taking without waiting for permission. It requires demanding instead of hoping. It requires creating urgency instead of absorbing it. And all of that feels wrong, because it violates the terms you agreed to. But those terms were designed to keep you in place, not to help you advance. And you cannot advance while performing them. You have to choose the contract or your movement, acceptance or advancement, being good or being effective. You cannot have both. The system will not allow it. Because the system needs people who stay in place, who accept the contract, who perform goodness in exchange for acceptance. And as long as you keep performing, the system will keep accepting you. But it will never advance you. Because advancing you would mean losing someone who performs the contract without demanding more. And the system does not want to lose that. So it keeps you exactly where you are. Accepted, valued, stuck. And you stay because breaking the contract feels like losing yourself. But you are not losing yourself. You are losing the version of yourself that agreed to terms that were never designed to serve you. The hidden contract of being good is not protection. It is limitation. And the only way out is to stop performing it. To stop behaving in ways that keep others comfortable. To stop absorbing disruption. To stop waiting for permission to move. And to accept that when you do, you will no longer be seen as good. You will be seen as something else. Something harder to ignore. And that is exactly what you need to be.
Chapter 6. Why Power Often Looks Wrong.
You see people with power and you judge them. You tell yourself they got there the wrong way, that they cut corners, that they do not deserve it. And maybe some of that is true, but that is not why you judge them. You judge them because they did something you are afraid to do. They moved without permission. They took without asking. They prioritized themselves without waiting for approval. And this feels wrong to you because you have never done it. You have waited. You have asked. You have deferred. And you have been told that this is the right way. That people who do not wait are cheating. That people who take without asking are selfish. But they are not cheating. They are moving. And you are not moving. You are judging. Judgment is what people do when they are afraid to act. It is easier to label someone else as wrong than to admit you are afraid to do what they did. It is easier to say they do not deserve their position than to admit you are too afraid to pursue yours. It is easier to call them selfish than to admit you have been too selfless. And that is what you have been. Too selfless. You have given endlessly. You have waited endlessly. You have deferred endlessly. And it has not worked. But instead of admitting that, you judge the people it did work for. You tell yourself they are different, that they lack integrity, that they do not care about doing things the right way. But the right way is just the way you were taught. It is not universal. It is not moral. It is just familiar. And familiar feels safe. So you call it right. But right and wrong are not about ethics. They are about fear. When you say something is wrong, you are not making a moral judgment. You are expressing discomfort. You are uncomfortable with the idea of doing what that person did. So you label it wrong. And the label protects you. It protects you from having to admit that you are capable of the same thing, but too afraid to try. Because trying would mean violating everything you have been taught, everything you have built your identity on. It would mean being selfish, being pushy, being someone who does not wait their turn. And you cannot be that person. Because being that person would mean losing your moral high ground. And your moral high ground is all you have left. It is the only thing that makes being powerless feel acceptable. You tell yourself that at least you did it the right way, that at least you have integrity, that at least you are not like them. And this makes you feel better, temporarily, but it does not change your position. It does not give you power. It does not move you forward. It just keeps you in place while others move around you. And every time someone moves, you judge them, because their movement reminds you of your stillness. And your stillness is unbearable. So you make their movement immoral. You tell yourself they are wrong, that they are bad, that they do not deserve what they have. But they do deserve it, because they acted, and you did not. You waited for permission. You followed the rules. You did everything you were supposed to do, and it did not work. But instead of changing your approach, you judge theirs. You judge people who negotiate harder, who demand more, who refuse to accept the first offer. You tell yourself they are aggressive, that they are too much, that they do not know how to be grateful. But they are not too much. You are too little. You accept too little. You ask for too little. You settle for too little. And instead of asking for more, you judge people who do. This is what moral judgment is. It is fear dressed as ethics. You are afraid of what it would require to act the way they act. So you make their actions immoral. You tell yourself that power is corrupt, that ambition is selfish, that wanting more is greedy. And all of this protects you from having to want more yourself. Because wanting more would mean admitting that what you have is not enough. That being good has not been enough. That waiting has not been enough. And you cannot admit that. Because admitting that would mean everything you have done was wrong. Not morally wrong, strategically wrong. You played by rules that do not lead to power, and now you are powerless. But instead of changing the rules you follow, you judge the people who broke them. You tell yourself they are the problem, that they are what is wrong with the world. But they are not the problem. They are just the people who refuse to stay stuck. And you are stuck, deeply stuck, stuck in a position you do not want, stuck in a role you did not choose, stuck waiting for something that is not coming. And instead of moving, you judge. You judge people who move. You judge people who take. You judge people who refuse to wait. And your judgment keeps you safe. It keeps you morally superior. It keeps you from having to face the fact that you are afraid. You are afraid of being seen the way you see them, as selfish, as wrong, as someone who does not deserve what they have. And that fear is what keeps you powerless. Because power requires doing things that look wrong to people who are still afraid. Power requires taking without permission. It requires refusing to wait. It requires prioritizing yourself even when others call it selfish. And you cannot do that. Because you need to be seen as good more than you need to be powerful. And that need is destroying you. It is keeping you small, keeping you stuck, keeping you powerless. And the people you judge are not destroying you. You are destroying yourself by staying in place, by refusing to act, by choosing moral superiority over effectiveness. And moral superiority does not pay bills. It does not create opportunities. It does not give you power. It just makes you feel better about not having any. You do not hate power. You hate what it would require from you. You hate that it would require you to stop being good, to stop waiting, to stop judging and start acting. And you are not ready to do that. Not yet. So you stay where you are, judging people who moved, telling yourself they are wrong. And they are not wrong. They are just free. Free from the need to be seen as good. Free from the fear of being judged. Free from the belief that waiting is noble. And you are not free. You are trapped. Trapped by your own judgment. Trapped by your own fear. Trapped by your own need to be right instead of effective. And until you are willing to be wrong, you will remain trapped. Because movement always looks wrong at first, to people who are still waiting.
Chapter 7: Moral Superiority as Compensation.
You do not have power, but you have something else. You have the belief that you are better, not more successful, not more influential, not more prioritized, just better, morally better, ethically better, better in ways that matter even if they do not produce results. This is your compensation. This is what you get for being powerless. You get to feel superior. You get to look at people with power and tell yourself they do not deserve it, that they got it the wrong way, that they lack what you have. And what you have is integrity, patience, goodness. And you believe these things make you better, even if they do not make you more successful. This is moral superiority. And it is not a virtue. It is a defense mechanism. It is what you use to make powerlessness feel acceptable. You tell yourself that at least you are good, that at least you did it right, that at least you can look at yourself in the mirror. And this makes you feel better. It makes being overlooked feel noble. It makes losing feel like winning in a different way. But it is not winning. It is losing with better branding. You are still losing. You are still being passed over. You are still powerless. But you have dressed it up as moral victory. And this allows you to stay exactly where you are without feeling like a failure. Because you are not failing. You are just choosing integrity over success. Except you are not choosing. You are afraid. You are afraid of what it would take to be successful. So you have made success immoral. You have told yourself that people who succeed are compromising, that they are cutting corners, that they are doing things you would never do. And this protects you. It protects you from having to try. Because if success requires compromise, and you refuse to compromise, then your lack of success is not a failure. It is a choice, a moral choice. And moral choices feel better than failures. So you make them constantly. You choose patience over urgency, integrity over effectiveness, goodness over power. And every time you make these choices, you feel superior. You feel superior to people who do not wait, who do not defer, who do not stay in place. And that feeling of superiority is your reward. It is what you get instead of power. But it is not a fair trade. Moral superiority does not create opportunities. It does not open doors. It does not change your position. It just makes your position feel more acceptable. And you need it to feel acceptable. Because if it does not, you would have to admit that everything you have done has not worked. That being good has not protected you. That following the rules has not advanced you. That waiting has not been rewarded. And you cannot admit that. Because admitting that would mean you wasted years. Years being good. Years waiting. Years believing that doing the right thing would eventually pay off. But it has not paid off. And it will not. Because the right thing is not the effective thing. It is just the acceptable thing. And you have chosen acceptability over effectiveness your entire life. And now you are stuck. And instead of changing, you judge. You judge people who are not stuck. People who moved. People who acted. And your judgment makes you feel better. It makes you feel like you are still winning in some other dimension. The moral dimension. The dimension where being right is more important than being effective. But that dimension does not exist. It is a story you tell yourself to avoid facing reality. And reality is that you are powerless. And your powerlessness is not noble. It is just powerlessness. It is not a choice. It is a result. A result of years of choosing to be good instead of effective. Of choosing to wait instead of act. Of choosing to judge instead of move. And now you are here, listening to this, hoping for an answer. But the answer is not comfortable. The answer is that your moral superiority is not protecting you. It is trapping you. It is keeping you from acting. Because acting would require doing things that feel wrong. Things that violate your sense of what is right. Things that make you look selfish. Things that make you feel like you are compromising. And you cannot compromise. Because compromising would mean losing your moral high ground. And your moral high ground is the only thing that makes being powerless feel acceptable. Without it, you would just be someone who lost. Someone who got passed over. Someone who did everything right and got nothing. And that is unbearable. So you hold on to your moral superiority. You hold on to the belief that you are better, even if better does not mean more successful, even if better does not mean more powerful, even if better does not mean more chosen. You are better, and that has to be enough. Except it is not enough. It has never been enough. And deep down, you know that. You know that being right does not pay bills. That being good does not create opportunities. That being morally superior does not change your position. But you cannot admit it. Because admitting it would mean letting go of the only thing that makes losing feel acceptable. And you are not ready to let go. Not yet. So you stay where you are, judging, feeling superior, telling yourself that at least you did it right. And you did do it right, according to the rules you were given. But the rules you were given were designed to keep you in place. And they worked. You are exactly where the rules said you should be. Powerless, but morally acceptable. And acceptable is not enough. It never was. But it is all you have. So you protect it. You protect your moral superiority with judgment, with criticism, with the belief that people who have power do not deserve it. And this belief keeps you safe. It keeps you from having to want power yourself. Because wanting power would mean admitting that being good is not enough. That being right is not enough. That being morally superior is not enough. And you cannot admit that. Because that would mean everything you built your identity on is not protection. It is limitation. And limitation is what moral superiority is. It is a limitation disguised as virtue. It keeps you from acting, from moving, from doing what is necessary to change your position. And as long as you hold on to it, you will remain exactly where you are. Powerless, overlooked, unchosen, but morally superior. And that will have to be enough. Because it is all you are willing to take.
Part 3. Why Goodness Fails in the Real World. Chapter 8. Goodness Collapses Under Pressure.
Goodness works until it does not. It works in calm environments, in stable systems, in moments where there is enough to go around. But the moment pressure arrives, goodness collapses. Not because good people are weak. Because goodness is a luxury position. It is a position you can only hold when there is no cost to holding it. When resources are abundant, you can afford to be patient. When opportunities are plentiful, you can afford to wait your turn. When conflict is avoidable, you can afford to stay calm. But the moment any of that changes, goodness stops working. The moment resources become scarce, patience becomes a liability. The moment opportunities become limited, waiting becomes losing. The moment conflict becomes unavoidable, calmness becomes invisibility. And you do not know how to function outside of goodness. You have built your entire strategy around being good, around being patient, around avoiding conflict. And when the environment no longer rewards those things, you do not adapt. You collapse. Not loudly, quietly. You collapse by continuing to be good in a situation that punishes goodness. You continue to wait while others take. You continue to defer while others demand. You continue to avoid conflict while others use it to reposition themselves. And you lose. Every time. Not because you are incapable, because you are inflexible. You cannot operate outside the moral framework you built your identity on. And that framework only functions in low-pressure environments. The moment pressure increases, the framework fails. This is why good people collapse during crisis. Not because they lack ability, because they lack permission to act outside their moral identity. They need to be seen as good even when being good is destroying them. And crisis does not care about your identity. It does not care that you are good. It does not reward patience or fairness or waiting your turn. Crisis rewards speed, decisiveness, the willingness to act without consensus. And you cannot do that, because acting without consensus feels wrong. It feels selfish. It feels like you are taking advantage. So you wait. You wait for agreement. You wait for permission. You wait for the right moment. And while you wait, the crisis deepens. And someone else acts. Someone who is not waiting for permission. Someone who is not concerned with being seen as good. Someone who is willing to make a decision that pisses people off. And that person survives. Not because they are better, because they are willing to be seen as worse. And you are not willing. So you collapse. You collapse by staying good while everything around you demands that you be effective. This is not just about crisis. This is about conflict. Goodness avoids conflict. It smooths over disagreement. It seeks compromise. It prioritizes harmony. And in stable environments, this works. It keeps things calm. It keeps relationships intact. It keeps you accepted. But the moment conflict becomes necessary, goodness fails. Because some conflicts cannot be avoided. Some conflicts must be escalated. Some conflicts require that you make someone uncomfortable. And you cannot do that. Because making someone uncomfortable feels like being bad. So you de-escalate. You smooth things over. You absorb the discomfort yourself rather than allowing it to land on the person who caused it. And this destroys you. It destroys your boundaries. It destroys your leverage. It destroys your ability to protect yourself. Because protection requires conflict. It requires saying no in ways that create consequences. It requires making someone else uncomfortable instead of absorbing their behavior. And you do not do that. You absorb. Always. You absorb disrespect. You absorb dismissal. You absorb being deprioritized. And you do it because escalating feels wrong. Because creating conflict feels immature. Because holding someone accountable feels aggressive. But it is not aggressive. It is necessary. And your inability to do it is not maturity. It is avoidance. You are avoiding conflict because you are afraid of being seen as difficult. And that fear is killing your position. Because the people who are willing to escalate are the people who get taken seriously. Not because they are louder. Because they make inaction costly. They make it clear that ignoring them will create a problem. That dismissing them will generate friction. That deprioritizing them will not be smooth. And this creates pressure. Pressure that forces others to respond. But you do not create pressure. You absorb it. You make it easy for people to ignore you. Easy to dismiss you. Easy to deprioritize you. Because ignoring you does not create a problem. It creates relief. Relief from having to deal with one more person. Relief from having to redistribute resources. Relief from having to make someone else uncomfortable. And you provide that relief willingly. Because creating discomfort feels wrong. But discomfort is leverage. And without it, you have no leverage. This is why goodness collapses under pressure. Because pressure requires leverage. And goodness eliminates leverage in favor of harmony. And harmony is not protection. Harmony is the absence of visible conflict. But conflict still exists. It is just being absorbed by you instead of being addressed. You are absorbing disrespect, absorbing inequality, absorbing the cost of other people's choices. And you are doing it silently. Because speaking up feels like creating conflict. But silence is not peace. Silence is surrender. You are surrendering your position in real time by refusing to make your displeasure costly. And the moment scarcity arrives, your position disappears completely. Because scarcity does not distribute itself fairly. It distributes itself toward pressure, toward the people who make demands, who create urgency, who refuse to absorb outcomes quietly. And you are not one of those people. So you get nothing. You get nothing in layoffs. You get nothing in budget cuts. You get nothing when opportunities become limited. Because you have never made yourself a priority. You have made yourself easy to overlook. And the moment there is not enough to go around, you are the first person overlooked. Not because you are less valuable, because you are less urgent. You do not create urgency. You create stability. And stability is useful when there is abundance. But when there is scarcity, stability is expendable. The people who create urgency are kept. The people who create stability are cut. Because urgency signals importance. And stability signals replaceability. You have made yourself replaceable by being too stable, by absorbing too much, by never creating pressure. And now, under pressure, you have nothing. No leverage. No urgency. No ability to make yourself a priority. Because you spent years making sure you were never a priority. You made sure you were always the one who adjusted, who absorbed, who stayed calm. And calm does not survive scarcity. Calm gets eliminated first. Because scarcity requires that you fight. Not physically, strategically. It requires that you make a case for yourself that is impossible to ignore. That you create consequences for being overlooked. That you refuse to absorb outcomes quietly. And you cannot do that. Because fighting feels wrong. So you stay calm. You stay good. You stay quiet. And you lose everything. Not because you deserve to lose. Because you were too afraid to fight. And fear disguised as goodness is still fear. You were afraid to escalate. Afraid to create conflict. Afraid to make someone uncomfortable. And that fear destroyed your position. Because positions are not maintained through goodness. They are maintained through boundaries. And boundaries require conflict. They require making it costly to cross you. They require refusing to absorb what others try to offload. And you do not have boundaries. You have flexibility. And flexibility under pressure is just collapse in slow motion. You are collapsing right now. Not because you are weak. Because you are still trying to be good in an environment that punishes goodness. And until you are willing to be something other than good, you will continue collapsing. Slowly, quietly, completely.
Chapter 9. When being good makes you invisible.
You think being good makes you visible. It does not. It makes you forgettable. You think people notice your consistency, your reliability, your steady contribution. They do not. They rely on it. And reliance does not generate attention. Attention goes to disruption, to friction, to the person who creates a problem that needs solving. And you do not create problems. You solve them. You solve them quietly. You handle things without needing recognition. You make everything easier without making noise. And this makes you invisible. Not because you are doing less. Because you are doing it too smoothly. Smooth does not get noticed. Smooth gets taken for granted. You are taken for granted in every meeting you attend, every project you contribute to, every relationship you maintain, because you do not create friction. And without friction, there is no visibility. This is why the loudest person in the meeting gets heard. Not because they have better ideas, because they make it impossible to ignore them. They interrupt. They dominate. They refuse to let the conversation move forward without their input being addressed. And you sit there, waiting for your turn, waiting for someone to notice you have something to say, and no one notices, because you are not creating a reason to notice. You are being polite, being respectful, being good. And good people do not get noticed in meetings. They get thanked afterward, thanked for their preparation, for their insight, for their thoughtful contribution. But thanked is not remembered. Thanked is dismissed. You are dismissed the moment the meeting ends, the moment the decision is made, the moment the credit is distributed, because you did not make yourself central to the conversation. You made yourself available to it. And available is not the same as influential. Influence requires that people cannot proceed without addressing you, that your presence creates a disruption that must be managed. And your presence creates nothing. It creates ease. You make everything easier by not requiring attention, by not demanding space, by not making your input a condition for moving forward. And this makes you useful. but it does not make you influential. Influential people are not the ones who make things easier. They are the ones who make things harder to ignore. They make it harder to ignore their ideas by refusing to let the conversation move on without them. They make it harder to ignore their needs by creating consequences for doing so. They make it harder to ignore their presence by being disruptive instead of smooth. And you are smooth. Completely smooth. You smooth over tension. You smooth over disagreement. You smooth over conflict. And this makes you liked. But it does not make you prioritized. Priority goes to the person who generates tension, who refuses to smooth things over, who makes it clear that ignoring them will cost something. And you do not cost anything to ignore. You make it easy. You make it easy by not speaking up when interrupted, by not pushing back when dismissed, by not making your displeasure visible when overlooked. You absorb it. You stay calm. You stay good. And this makes you invisible, not because you are not contributing, because your contribution does not create disruption. And disruption is what generates attention. This is true in meetings. It is true in negotiations. It is true in social groups. You think being agreeable makes you liked. It does. But liked is not the same as remembered. You are liked because you do not create problems. But you are forgotten because you do not create moments. Moments are created through friction, through saying something that shifts the conversation, through taking a position that forces others to respond. And you do not take positions. You accommodate them. You accommodate other people's preferences, other people's needs, other people's timelines. And this makes you easy to work with. But it does not make you someone people think about when opportunities arise. Because opportunities go to people who stand out. And you do not stand out. You blend in. Perfectly. You blend in by being too flexible, too accommodating, too willing to adjust. An adjustment is not visibility. Adjustment is erasure. You are erasing yourself in real time by making sure you never create friction. And friction is what makes people remember you. Not negative friction. Just friction. The friction of having a perspective that differs. The friction of refusing to agree too quickly. The friction of making people work to convince you instead of assuming they already have. But you do not make people work for anything. You give immediately. You give your agreement, your flexibility, your willingness to adjust. And this makes you convenient. But convenience is not influence. Influence requires that people cannot move forward without considering you. That your input is not optional, that ignoring you creates a gap, and you do not create gaps. You fill them. You fill every gap, every silence, every need, and this makes you useful. But it does not make you central. Central requires being someone whose absence would be felt, whose disagreement would matter, whose displeasure would create a problem. And your displeasure does not create a problem. It creates nothing, because you do not express it. You manage it internally. You stay calm. You stay good, and this makes you invisible. You are invisible in negotiations. You are invisible in promotions. You are invisible in social dynamics. Not because you are not there, because you do not create a reason to focus on you. You accept the first offer. You wait for opportunities to be given. You stay quiet until called on. And none of this generates visibility. Visibility requires that you make yourself impossible to overlook, that you create friction that must be addressed, that you refuse to make everything easy, but you make everything easy for everyone. You make it easy for your boss to overlook you by never making demands. You make it easy for your partner to deprioritize you by never making your needs urgent. You make it easy for your friends to take you for granted by always being available. And this is why you are invisible. Not because you are not enough. Because you are too much of what is easy to ignore. You are too reliable, too predictable, too smooth. And smooth does not generate attention. Disruption does. Disruption is not cruelty. Disruption is refusal. Refusal to accept the first offer. Refusal to adjust endlessly. Refusal to make your needs optional. But you do not refuse. You accept. Always. And acceptance is not visibility. Acceptance is invisibility. You are invisible because you have made yourself too easy to move past, too easy to dismiss, too easy to forget. And you will remain invisible until you are willing to create friction, until you are willing to make people stop and address you, until you are willing to be disruptive instead of smooth. But you are not willing. Not yet. You are still trying to be noticed by being good, by being helpful, by being easy. And easy is not memorable. Easy is forgettable. You are forgotten the moment you leave the room, the moment the conversation ends, the moment the decision is made. Because you did not create a reason to be remembered. You created ease. And ease is invisible.
Chapter 10, Why Bad People Win.
You call them bad people. They are not bad. They are just not harmless. There is a difference. Bad implies immorality, cruelty, malice. And most of the people you call bad are not cruel. They are just willing to do things you are not willing to do. They are willing to negotiate harder, to say no without guilt, to prioritize themselves without apologizing. And this makes them look bad to you, because you have been taught that prioritizing yourself is selfish, that saying no is unkind, that negotiating hard is aggressive. But it is not selfish. It is self-preservation. It is not unkind. It is boundary. It is not aggressive. It is effective. And the people you call bad are just people who are willing to be effective instead of acceptable. They are willing to make others uncomfortable, to create friction, to refuse to absorb outcomes quietly. And this makes them powerful, not because they are immoral, because they are not harmless. Harmless people do not win. Harmless people get managed. And you are harmless, completely harmless. You do not threaten anyone. You do not disrupt anything. You do not create problems that need solving. And this makes you safe. But it does not make you powerful. Power requires that people cannot ignore you without cost. That dismissing you creates a consequence. That overlooking you generates a problem. And you do not generate problems. You prevent them. You prevent them by being accommodating, by being flexible, by absorbing disappointment without retaliating. And this makes you useful. But it does not make you someone people prioritize. Priority goes to people who cannot be easily dismissed. People who make their displeasure costly. People who are not harmless. And the people you call bad are not harmless. They make demands. They create urgency. They refuse to wait quietly. And this gets them what they want. Not because they are bad. Because they are willing to be uncomfortable. They are willing to be uncomfortable with other people's disappointment, with other people's disapproval, with other people's judgment. And you are not willing. You need approval too much. You need to be seen as good, as reasonable, as someone who does not create problems. And that need is what keeps you harmless. Because the moment you prioritize approval over effectiveness, you lose leverage. Leverage requires that you are willing to disappoint people, to refuse them, to make them adjust to you instead of endlessly adjusting to them. And you do not do that. You adjust. Always. You adjust your tone, your needs, your expectations. And this makes you acceptable. But it does not make you powerful. The people you call bad do not adjust. They make others adjust to them. Not through cruelty. Through refusal. They refuse to accept less than they want. They refuse to wait longer than they are willing. They refuse to make their needs optional. And this creates pressure. Pressure that forces others to respond. And response is what generates priority. You do not generate response. You generate compliance. You comply with other people's timelines, other people's preferences, other people's decisions. And compliance is not strength. Compliance is surrender. You are surrendering your position by being too willing to comply, by being too flexible, by being too harmless. And harmless does not win. Harmless gets passed over. The people you call bad are not getting ahead because they are immoral. They are getting ahead because they refuse to be harmless. They refuse to make themselves easy to overlook. They refuse to absorb outcomes quietly. They refuse to prioritize other people's comfort over their own advancement. And this makes them look selfish to you, because you have been taught that prioritizing yourself is wrong. But it is not wrong. It is necessary. Necessary for advancement. Necessary for leverage. Necessary for being taken seriously. And you are not taken seriously. You are taken for granted. You are taken for granted because you have proven that you will stay regardless of how you are treated, that you will perform regardless of whether you are rewarded, that you will contribute regardless of whether you are acknowledged. And this makes you reliable. But it does not make you a priority. Priority requires that people believe you might leave, that you might withdraw, that ignoring you might cost them something. And you have never created that belief. You have created the opposite belief. The belief that you will stay no matter what, that you will absorb no matter what, that you will remain good no matter what. And this belief is killing your leverage. Because leverage requires uncertainty. It requires that people are not sure what you will do if they continue dismissing you. And they are sure. They are sure you will stay. They are sure you will adjust. They are sure you will remain harmless. And harmless people do not create leverage. They create predictability. And predictability is not power. Predictability is control. You are being controlled by your own predictability, by your own refusal to be disruptive, by your own commitment to being good. And the people you call bad are not being controlled because they are not predictable. They might say no. They might walk away. They might make demands that others find unreasonable. And this unpredictability is what gives them power, not their immorality. Their willingness to be unpredictable. You are too predictable. Everyone knows what you will do. You will wait. You will adjust. You will stay. And this makes you safe to deprioritize. Because deprioritizing you does not create a problem. But deprioritizing the people you call bad does create a problem. Because they do not absorb it quietly. They escalate. They push back. They make it clear that continuing to overlook them will be costly. And cost is what generates response. Not goodness. Goodness generates appreciation. Cost generates action. And you generate appreciation. Constantly. You are appreciated for being reasonable, for being flexible, for being good. But appreciation is not priority. Appreciation is dismissal dressed as gratitude. You are being dismissed in real time. And you are accepting it because it comes with praise. But praise is not power. Praise is management. You are being managed. Kept in place. Kept harmless. And the people you call bad are not being managed. Because they refuse to be harmless. They refuse to stay in place. They refuse to accept outcomes quietly. They refuse to make themselves easy to overlook. And this refusal is what wins. Not immorality. Refusal. Refusal to be harmless. Refusal to absorb endlessly. Refusal to prioritize being good over being effective. And you are not refusing. You are accepting. You are accepting every outcome, every dismissal, every deprioritization. And you are doing it because refusing feels wrong, because pushing back feels aggressive, because making demands feels selfish. But it is not selfish. It is survival. And the people you call bad are surviving. They are thriving, not because they are bad, because they are not harmless. They did not win because they were bad. They won because they were not harmless. And you will not win until you are willing to stop being harmless, until you are willing to create friction, to make demands, to refuse to absorb quietly. But you are not willing. Not yet. You are still calling them bad, still judging them, still telling yourself that at least you are good. And you are good. But good is not winning. Good is losing quietly, with dignity, with moral superiority, but still losing. And they are winning, not with dignity, not with moral superiority, just winning. And winning does not require being bad. It requires not being harmless. And you are still harmless, completely harmless. And that is why you are still losing.
Part 4, Exiting the Moral Trap. Chapter 11, Redefining Strength Without Goodness.
You have been confusing strength with goodness your entire life. You think staying calm is strength. It is not. It is control. You think being patient is strength. It is not. It is waiting. You think managing yourself is strength. It is not. It is self-regulation performed for an audience. Strength is not about how well you manage yourself. Strength is about capacity. Capacity to act. Capacity to withstand. Capacity to move when movement is necessary. And you do not have capacity. You have constraint. You are constrained by the need to be seen as good, by the need to be approved of, by the need to never be too much. And constraint is not strength. Constraint is limitation wearing the mask of virtue. You have spent years calling your limitations strengths, calling your fear patience, calling your avoidance maturity. But they are not strengths. They are survival mechanisms that stopped serving you years ago. And you are still performing them, still waiting, still managing yourself into invisibility. Strength without goodness is not cruelty. It is capacity without justification. It is the ability to act without needing permission, to move without needing consensus, to prioritize yourself without needing approval. And you do not have that ability, not because you are incapable, because you are dependent, You are dependent on other people's approval to feel safe acting. You are dependent on other people's agreement to feel justified moving. You are dependent on being seen as good to feel acceptable existing. And that dependency is not strength. It is weakness disguised as virtue. Real strength does not require justification. It does not require that everyone agrees before you act. It does not require that you explain yourself until others are comfortable. Real strength is the capacity to act even when others are uncomfortable, even when others disapprove, even when others call you selfish. And you do not have that capacity because you need to be right more than you need to be effective. You need to be morally justified before you act. You need to be certain you are not being selfish. You need to know that others will understand. But understanding is not a requirement for action. It is a comfort you are demanding before you are willing to move. And that demand is keeping you stuck. You are waiting for permission that will never come, for approval that is not necessary, for consensus that is not required. And while you wait, others act. Without permission, without approval, without consensus. They act because they have capacity, not because they are certain, not because they are right, because they can tolerate being uncertain and still move. And you cannot. You need certainty. You need rightness. You need goodness. And that need is destroying your capacity to function outside of environments that validate you. Strength is not about being validated. Strength is about acting without validation. It is about making decisions that others will judge, setting boundaries that others will resent, prioritizing yourself when others expect you to prioritize them. And none of that feels good. It feels wrong. But wrong is just the feeling you get when you violate a pattern others have come to rely on. And others rely on your goodness. They rely on your flexibility. They rely on your willingness to absorb and adjust and wait. And the moment you stop, they will call it wrong. They will call you selfish. They will tell you this is not who you are. And you will feel that judgment as proof that you are failing, that you are becoming bad, that you are losing yourself. But you are not losing yourself. You are losing the version of yourself that was built to keep others comfortable. And that version was never strong. It was controlled. Control is not the same as strength. Control is the suppression of capacity in favor of acceptability. You have been suppressing your capacity your entire life. Your capacity to demand, to refuse, to act without waiting for approval. And you have called that suppression strength. But it is not strength. It is fear. Fear of being too much. Fear of being selfish. Fear of being bad. And that fear has kept you small, kept you harmless, kept you good. But small is not strong. Harmless is not powerful. Good is not effective. Strength requires that you stop performing goodness and start acting from capacity. Capacity to say no without guilt. Capacity to take without permission. Capacity to move without consensus. And none of that requires cruelty. It just requires that you stop needing approval before you act. Approval is not a prerequisite for movement. It is a comfort you have been demanding because movement without it feels dangerous. But it is not dangerous. It is just uncomfortable. And discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is just the feeling of moving outside the position you have occupied for years. You have occupied the position of the good person, the flexible person, the person who makes everything easier. And exiting that position will create discomfort for you and for everyone who relied on you staying there. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your position is. And your position is weak. Not because you are weak. Because you have been performing weakness as virtue. You have been performing patience when action was required. You have been performing calm when escalation was necessary. You have been performing goodness when effectiveness was needed. And performance is not strength. Performance is the opposite of strength. Strength is action without the need for it to look right, without the need for it to be understood, without the need for it to be approved. Strength is moving because you have the capacity to move, not because you have permission. And you do not need permission. You have never needed permission. You needed approval. And you confused approval with permission. But approval is optional. And permission is imaginary. No one can give you permission to prioritize yourself, to set boundaries, to refuse. Because permission implies authority. And no one has authority over your capacity except you. You are the only one who decides whether you act, whether you move, whether you stop absorbing and start refusing. And you have been deciding not to. Not because you lack capacity, because you lack willingness. You are unwilling to act without approval, unwilling to move without consensus, unwilling to be seen as anything other than good. And that unwillingness is not protection. It is paralysis. You are paralyzed by the need to be right, by the need to be justified, by the need to be good. And that paralysis is killing your strength. Because strength is not about being right. It is about having capacity and using it, even when it looks wrong, even when others judge, even when you are not certain. Certainty is not required. Capacity is. And you have capacity. You have always had capacity. You just called it something else. You called it aggression when it was assertion. You called it selfishness when it was boundary. You called it cruelty when it was refusal. And you suppressed it, because expressing it meant being seen as bad. But bad is just the word people use when you stop making their lives easier. And you do not have to make their lives easier. That was never your responsibility. Your responsibility is your position, your leverage, your capacity to function in the world. And you have sacrificed all of that to maintain goodness. But goodness is not strength. Goodness is the absence of threat. And you are not a threat to anyone. And that is exactly why you are losing. Strength without goodness is not about becoming a threat. It is about becoming someone with capacity who uses it, without waiting, without justifying, without performing, just acting, from capacity, without permission. And that is what you have never done. Not once. You have waited for permission your entire life. And it has not come. Because permission is not real. Capacity is. And you have it. You have always had it. The question is whether you are willing to use it without needing to be seen as good.
Chapter 12. From Good to Effective.
You cannot be both good and effective. Not in the way you have defined good. Good means acceptable. Effective means functional. And acceptability often conflicts with function. Because function requires that you prioritize outcome over appearance. That you act based on what works instead of what looks right. And you do not do that. You prioritize appearance. You prioritize being seen as good. And this makes you acceptable. But it does not make you effective. Effective people do not wait to be seen as right before they act. They act and allow others to decide whether it was right afterward. And you cannot do that. You need to know it is right before you act. You need to know you will not be judged, that you will not be called selfish, that you will not lose your identity as a good person. But that identity is the problem. That identity is what is keeping you ineffective. Because as long as you are committed to being good, you cannot be committed to being effective. The two are incompatible. One requires approval. The other requires action. And you have chosen approval. Every time. You have chosen to be liked over being prioritized. To be accepted over being effective. To be good over being powerful. And that choice has cost you everything. It has cost you opportunities. It has cost you leverage. It has cost you the ability to function in environments that do not reward goodness. And most environments do not reward goodness. They reward effectiveness. They reward people who get things done, who make decisions, who move without waiting for consensus. And you do not do that. You wait. You defer. You make sure everyone is comfortable before you act. And this makes you good. But it does not make you someone people prioritize. Priority goes to people who are effective, who deliver outcomes, who do not require management. And you require management, constant management. You require approval before you act. You require reassurance before you move. You require consensus before you decide. And this makes you dependent, not effective. Effective people do not require external validation to function. They function and allow validation to follow if it does. And if it does not, they continue functioning. But you do not continue. You stop. You wait for validation. You adjust until you receive it. And this makes you manageable. But it does not make you powerful. Power requires that you stop waiting for validation and start acting from judgment. Your judgment, not theirs. Your judgment about what is necessary, about what needs to happen, about what you are willing to tolerate. And you do not trust your judgment. You trust their approval. You trust that if they approve, you are right. And if they do not, you are wrong. But their approval is not evidence of rightness. It is evidence of alignment with their preferences. And their preferences are not your responsibility. Your effectiveness is. And effectiveness requires that you let go of the need to be seen as good. that you accept being disliked, being judged, being called selfish, and you are not willing to accept that. Not yet. You are still clinging to your moral self-image, still protecting the identity of being a good person. But that identity is costing you your effectiveness, your leverage, your ability to function outside of environments that reward compliance. And you will never be effective as long as you need to be good. Because goodness requires approval. Effectiveness requires action. And the two cannot coexist. Not in the same person. Not at the same time. You have to choose. Being good or being effective. Being liked or being prioritized. Being acceptable or being powerful. And you have been choosing goodness for years. And it has not worked. It has kept you stuck. It has kept you harmless. It has kept you losing. And the moment you decide to be effective instead, everything will change. Not because you will become cruel. Because you will stop being harmless. You will stop absorbing. You will stop waiting. You will stop performing goodness for people who do not prioritize you. And they will notice. Immediately. They will notice that you are no longer flexible. That you are no longer accommodating. That you are no longer making their lives easier at the expense of your own. And they will respond. Not with celebration. With discomfort. They will tell you that you are changing. That this is not like you. That they preferred the old version. And the old version is the version that stayed in place. That absorbed outcomes. That made everything easier for them. And they want that version back. Because that version served them. But that version did not serve you. That version kept you powerless. And you do not have to go back. You do not have to perform goodness to maintain relationships that only function when you are powerless. Those relationships are not serving you. They are containing you. And the moment you stop performing, they will either adjust or end. And both outcomes are acceptable. Because staying in relationships that require your powerlessness is not acceptable. Not anymore. You have stayed too long already. You have performed too long already. You have been good too long already. And it has gotten you nothing except the approval of people who benefit from you staying small. But their approval is not worth your effectiveness. It is not worth your power. It is not worth your capacity to function in the world. And you will lose their approval the moment you become effective. The moment you stop waiting. The moment you stop being good. And that is the cost. That is what it requires. You have to be willing to lose the approval of people who only approve of you when you are harmless. And you have not been willing. You have been protecting that approval as if it were survival. But it is not survival. It is comfort. And comfort is not the same as safety. Comfort is the feeling of staying in a position that no longer serves you because leaving it feels dangerous. But it is not dangerous. It is just uncomfortable. And discomfort is the cost of movement. It is the cost of effectiveness. It is the cost of becoming someone who functions based on capacity instead of approval. And you will have to pay that cost. There is no way around it. You cannot become effective while maintaining the approval of people who need you to be good. You have to choose. And you have been choosing approval. And that choice has kept you exactly where you are. Powerless. Overlooked. Stuck. And you will remain there until you are willing to choose effectiveness instead. Until you are willing to act without consensus. To move without approval. To prioritize yourself without justification. And none of that will feel good. It will feel wrong. It will feel selfish. It will feel aggressive. It will feel like you are losing yourself. But you are not losing yourself. You are losing the performance of yourself that was designed to keep others comfortable. And that performance is not you. It is what you became to survive environments that punished authenticity. But you are not in those environments anymore. You do not need to perform anymore. You need to be effective. And effectiveness does not require performance. It requires action, judgment, the willingness to move without knowing whether others will approve. And that is what you have never done. You have never moved without approval. And you will have to, if you want to be effective, if you want to be prioritized, if you want to stop losing, you will have to move. Without permission, without consensus, without the certainty that you are right. And that uncertainty will be unbearable at first, because you have spent your entire life avoiding it. But avoiding uncertainty is what kept you stuck, and tolerating it is what will move you forward. You do not need to be certain. You need to be willing. Willing to act. Willing to be judged. Willing to be disliked. Willing to let go of goodness in favor of effectiveness. And that willingness is what you do not have. Not yet. You are still holding onto the belief that you can be both, that you can be good and effective, liked and powerful, acceptable and prioritized. But you cannot. The two are incompatible, and you will have to choose. Eventually, you will have to choose whether being seen as good is worth staying powerless, whether being liked is worth being overlooked, whether being acceptable is worth never being chosen. And the answer is no. It is not worth it. But you are not ready to accept that. Not yet. You are still clinging to the identity of being a good person, still protecting it, still performing it. And it is killing you. Slowly, quietly. And you know it. You have always known it. You have just been afraid to say it out loud. Afraid to admit that being good has not worked. That it has never worked. That it kept you safe when you were powerless. But now it is keeping you powerless. And you do not need safety anymore. You need effectiveness. You need the capacity to move, to act, to function without approval. And that capacity is waiting. It has always been waiting. It is just waiting for you to stop being good long enough to use it. If you stop being good, who do you become?
Final, the quiet consequence.
You thought this would end with a solution. It does not. There is no solution. There is only a choice. A choice you will have to make over and over. Every day, in every interaction, in every moment where you feel the pull to be good instead of effective. And you will feel that pull constantly. You will feel it when someone asks for something you do not want to give, when someone expects you to adjust, when someone assumes you will absorb what they do not want to deal with. And in those moments, you will have to choose. Again, goodness or effectiveness, approval or leverage, being liked or being prioritized. And most of the time, you will choose goodness. Because it is familiar, because it feels safe, because the alternative feels too costly. But sometimes, you will choose effectiveness. And in those moments, everything will shift. Not dramatically, quietly. People will adjust, or they will leave, or they will reveal that they were only there because you made their lives easier. And that revelation will hurt. Not because you lose them, because you realize how long you performed for people who were never going to prioritize you. How long you stayed small to keep them comfortable. How long you absorbed to keep them stable. And none of it mattered. None of it led anywhere. None of it made you matter more. It just kept you in place. And the people who leave when you stop being good are not losses. They are clarifications. Clarifications of who was there for you and who was there for what you provided. And most people were there for what you provided, not for you. They were there for your flexibility, your patience, your willingness to make everything easier. And the moment you stop providing that, they are gone. Not with anger, with distance. They stop calling. They stop including you. They stop needing you. Because they never needed you. They needed your performance. And your performance is over. Or it should be. But you are not sure you can stop. Because stopping means being alone. And being alone feels like failure. But it is not failure. It is filtration. Filtration of people who only valued you when you were valuable to them. Who only kept you close when you made their lives easier. And those people are not relationships. They are transactions. And you have been transacting your entire life. Giving in exchange for acceptance. Performing in exchange for belonging. But that is not belonging. That is conditional inclusion. And conditional inclusion is not safety. It is leverage held over you. Leverage that says if you stop performing, you will be excluded. If you stop being good, you will be alone. And you believed it. So you kept performing. But you do not have to keep performing. You can stop. And when you stop, some people will leave. And some people will adjust. And the ones who adjust are the ones worth keeping. Because they were never there for your performance. They were there for you. But most people will not adjust. Most people will leave. And that will hurt. Not because you wanted them to stay. Because you did not realize how conditional their presence was. How dependent it was on you staying small. On you staying good. On you staying harmless. And the moment you stop being harmless, they disappear. Not with confrontation. With silence. They just stop reaching out. Stop including you. Stop treating you as relevant. Because you are no longer relevant to them. You are no longer serving the function you once served. And that function was stabilizer. Absorber. The person who made everything easier. And you are not that person anymore. Or you are trying not to be. And it is hard. Harder than you thought it would be. Because you thought letting go of goodness would feel like freedom. And sometimes it does. But most of the time, it feels like loss. Loss of identity, loss of approval, loss of certainty about who you are. Because you do not know who you are without goodness. You have never been anything else. And becoming something else feels like becoming nothing. Like losing the only part of yourself that mattered. But that part did not matter. It just made you acceptable. And acceptable is not the same as valued. It is not the same as prioritized. It is not the same as powerful. It is just the minimum required to stay included. And you spent years performing the minimum. And it kept you included. But it did not move you forward. And now you are here, listening to this, hoping for a way out. But there is no way out. There is only a way through. Through the discomfort of being disliked. Through the isolation of being misunderstood. Through the fear of being wrong. And you will be wrong. Often, you will act without approval and realize you should have waited. You will refuse without justification and realize you should have explained. You will prioritize yourself and realize you hurt someone. And none of that will mean you should go back to being good. It will just mean you are learning to be effective. And effectiveness is messy. It is not clean. It is not morally certain. It is not universally approved. It is just functional. And function is what matters. Not how it looks. Not how it feels. Not whether others approve. Just whether it works. And what works is not goodness. What works is leverage. Leverage created through boundaries. Through refusal. Through prioritization. And you do not have leverage. You have given it all away. You have given it away to people who do not prioritize you. To systems that do not serve you. To identities that do not protect you. And getting it back will require taking. Not asking. Taking. Taking back your time. Your energy. Your willingness to make everything easier. And taking feels wrong. It feels selfish. It feels like becoming the kind of person you have spent your life judging. But it is not wrong. It is necessary. And the people you have been judging are not villains. They are just people who were willing to take what you were not willing to take. And they are winning. Not because they are bad. Because they were willing to move. And you have not been willing. You have been waiting. Waiting for permission. Waiting for fairness. Waiting for someone to finally notice you and choose you. But no one is coming. No one is noticing. No one is choosing you. Because choosing you would require them to lose what you provide. And they do not want to lose that. So they keep you where you are. And they choose someone else. Someone who is harder to ignore. Someone who creates urgency. Someone who is not harmless. And you are harmless. Still, even now, even after everything, you are still trying to be good. Still trying to find a way to be effective without being disliked. To be powerful without being judged. To be prioritized without being selfish. But there is no way. Those things are incompatible. You cannot be prioritized without making someone else wait. You cannot be powerful without making someone else adjust. You cannot be effective without making someone else uncomfortable. And you are not willing to make anyone uncomfortable. You would rather absorb the discomfort yourself. And that is why you are still losing. That is why you will continue losing. Until you are willing to stop absorbing. Until you are willing to stop being good. Until you are willing to move without approval. Without permission. Without the certainty that you are right. And you are not willing. Not yet. But eventually, you will be. Because staying where you are will become more unbearable than moving. And when that happens, you will move. Not because you want to. Because you have to. Because staying still will finally feel like dying. And moving will finally feel like survival. And you will move. Without permission. Without approval. Without goodness. And it will not feel triumphant. It will feel quiet. Like something ending. Like something breaking. Like something you can never go back to. And you cannot go back. Once you stop being good, you cannot return to it without knowing it was a performance. And that knowledge will change everything. Not immediately. Slowly. You will see people differently. You will see systems differently. You will see yourself differently. And none of it will feel liberating. It will just feel true. And truth is not comfort. Truth is just accuracy. The accuracy that goodness does not work. That it never worked. That it was always just a position you occupied to avoid something worse. And now you are in something worse. Because staying in that position has become unbearable. And leaving it will not make things better. It will just make them different. And different is all you have. Different is all there is. The choice to stop being good. To stop waiting. To stop performing. And to see what happens when you finally move. The world does not reward goodness. It rewards those who can move it.